I want to kind of close the loop on that explosive story from last week. Last week, I notified you that there is another call that now is playing a role in the investigation taking place in Georgia. Another call in which Donald Trump called the investigator in the Secretary of State's office in Georgia, again, to talk about, I need a couple thousand votes, and there was a lot of wrongdoing, and we won by a lot, and we won this by a lot, and all of these different statements. That call, which we learned about last week, we have now learned was found in a trash folder on the computer device of a state investigator, which raises new questions about whether there was an effort made to actually suppress the fact that that phone call took place. CNN reports that discovery of the call came after state officials originally said they didn't think audio of the call existed. And it turns out that it did exist. It was in the trash folder of an investigator involved in this. And it is the recording in which Trump pushes on the investigator, Francis Watson, claims of widespread voter fraud and trying to influence the investigation and subsequently really trying to overturn the results in Georgia so that the electoral votes in Georgia would go to Trump instead of to Joe Biden. The audio file is from a December 23 call. We listened to it last week, and the call is between Trump and investigator Francis Watson. It was discovered as the Georgia Secretary of State's office was responding to a public records request. The Washington Post first reported the details of how the audio emerged. Watson was asked, did you delete this? Why did you delete it? Why was it in that folder? It was uncovered only due to a FOIA request. Did you plan to come forward and say this exists? Because there's a big difference if you're an investigator between saying, hey, I have this call versus hitting delete and relegating it to your recycle bin, presumably for future deletion. Now, of course, we could say, if she really meant to eliminate the record, she would have cleared the recycle bin. I assume that by a folder of deleted files, they're talking about a recycle bin or equivalent. It's all very, very strange. And CNN previously reported that in that December phone call that's at issue, Trump was urging her to find ways to give him Georgia and saying she would be praised if she were able to overturn those results. And we now are going to have to see what the meaning and significance is of this. Last week, the bombshell was the call Trump made to Brad Raffensperger wasn't the only call to Georgia officials. Before the call to Brad Raffensperger, Trump actually called Francis Watson and said much of the same, which is, wow. So now we know this was not a one-off call. This was a series of scheduled phone calls. Now we learn that we learned of the audio because of a FOIA request, and it was in a deleted files folder on Francis Watson's computer, which starts to change maybe the course of this investigation, where maybe the investigators actually need to be investigated. So it's getting increasingly complex, increasingly muddied. And I asked this question, I'm not saying this rhetorically. Are there investigators in Georgia that can actually really investigate this objectively? Brad Raffensperger's office, the Secretary of State, they're clearly not the right place because they are participants in all of this. Brad Raffensperger was the one Trump called to try to influence on the results. So we know about investigator Francis Watson. But now we learned Francis Watson had deleted audio of the call, and it was in the recycle bin or something equivalent to it. So that's probably not the right person to investigate how it ended up there. So who exactly needs to be brought in? Do you need some kind of special investigator? Do federal authorities need to come in? Would they have jurisdiction? I don't know. But this needs to be figured out because this is just Georgia. But every week we are learning more that raises more questions rather than answering them about exactly how planned and coordinated was this effort to try to overturn the Georgia results. There's also now emails that have come out referencing upcoming phone calls with Donald Trump's then chief of staff, Mark Meadows, in Georgia, which again suggests the phone calls involving Trump were happening after other preparatory phone calls were already made. This may have been a much larger effort to, after the fact, try to steal Georgia from Joe Biden. Hopefully, we'll learn the full scope of it at some point in time. We're going to take a quick break. Stunning video from Senator Ron Johnson coming up after the break. And we will also talk about, this is strange, the announcement of urination on Fox News. I know it sounds crazy, but we'll talk about it after the break.